Okay, let's take some time for questions. What I'd like to do is not write them down, because I can't read them. I just like to do it orally. The reason they write them down is because people get up and they want to make a speech. And Bob said we don't want that. We want you to just state the question succinctly so that other people have an opportunity. So I'll just do it orally, raise your hand, and then we'll interact. Yeah.
Could you clarify the two senses of entering the kingdom?
Yeah, the two senses of entering the kingdom. I'm suggesting that initial entrance is by faith alone and results in regeneration. But when Jesus talks about a future entrance, a final entrance, and relates it to works, that he's talking about status, greatness. It's verse 20 of Matthew 5 is an explanation of how to become great in verse 19. Yeah.
How is that like not entering twice then? I mean, isn't that kind of like special pleading in a sense? And, would initial entrance be prepositional, experiential, or both?
Both. The final entrance is it's not special pleading, at least the way I'm arguing it, because you've got a guy in verse 19 of Matthew 5 who's in the kingdom, but according to verse 20, he doesn't have the righteousness necessary to enter it. Ergo, since he's already entered, in one sense, the one in verse 20 must mean a different sense. And how do I justify that? Well, I say, Jesus says, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness. So he's pointing back to verse 19, and he's expanding on how to become great. Make sense? Obviously not. Go ahead.
I thought it still seems like he's entering twice, though.
Well, yes, the meaning changes. Just like there's two senses of justification. There's a vindication before men, and there's a declaration of imputed righteousness. There's two senses of inheritance. There's an inheritance that comes to us by faith alone, apart from works, but there's an inheritance that is a reward, Colossians 3:24. There's two senses of eternal life. There's eternal life in the sense of obtaining heaven and regeneration, but eternal life also in the sense of an abundant experience of life. And I'm just saying that there's two senses of the word enter as well. But the final entrance, the person goes into the kingdom geographically, spatially, but he doesn't rule there. In fact, one way to translate, like in Matthew 25, where it says he looks to the sheep and he says, inherit a kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. It's probably best to render that, inherit a kingship. It's an arthros in Greek. It's a city, 5 or 10, that have been prepared for this faithful believer from the foundation of the world. So that final entrance, that final inheritance, is a kingship. It's co-rulership with Jesus in the final destiny of man. I got it with my wife. Good point. I thought I'd comment on this. I do not in any way want to suggest that Alan is not a believer. In fact, I'm in correspondence with him right now. My best take on it, he's a fine guy, loves the Lord, and we're exchanging emails right now. So I actually, as I've talked with him, I've sensed that he really has a sincere heart, and he's not hostile or anything like that. And his book has a lot of commendable qualities. He's clear on a lot of issues that we would agree upon. But
Jody, in Matthew 6, the one who's able to send you to hell, basically, and parallel passage, can we see hell as a broader category, including the fire of purification, in which one's worthless works and inheritance will be burned and destroyed? For instance, Revelation 21:7 and 8, the meros, the portion, is in the lake of fire, and that would be parallel with 1 Corinthians 3:14-15 that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think personally, in fact, I've written, published a journal article on this, that in some places in the New Testament, Gehenna is a reference to shame and disgrace at the judgment seat of Christ. Like in Matthew 25, it's the Gehenna of fire, the eternal damnation in the lake of fire. But it is possible in other places that the reference is not to hell. Now, this does nothing with at least in my opinion. Now, that's very controversial, although there's a lot of guys that hold it, such as Michael Eaton, R.T. Kendall, A.B. Bruce, Adam Clark, N.T. Wright, a few others. So it's not totally novel, but at any rate, it is possible. Yes, ma'am.
Of the 1,000-year reign of Christ, are you saying that all believers will be present on earth in the 1,000 years?
Yes. In my view, all believers will be present on earth during the 1,000 years.
And some will not.
Some will not, yeah. Yes, sir.
Is the abundant entrance of 2 Peter 1 akin to what we've been talking about?
Absolutely. That's what I would go to. The abundant entrance in 2 Peter 1 is this final entrance into greatness and status in the coming kingdom. Yeah.
You said on the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus is addressing regenerate believers.
Right.
Could you go into I guess when people were regenerated, when that first started? I mean.
It says in chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, that his disciples came up and apparently surrounded him, and he said to them. So I'm saying, okay, that's what it says. So now, there may have been unregenerate people, hangers-on, listening, but the intent of the sermon appears to be addressed to the disciples. In fact, R.T. France, in his commentary on Matthew, which, by the way, it is the best commentary I've ever read on Matthew. It's excellent. It's new. He says, look, let's not call this the Sermon on the Mount. Let's call it the Discourse on Discipleship. And it's a manual on how he wants his regenerate disciples to live if they're going to obtain greatness in the future reign of David's greater son. R.T. France, Gospel of Matthew. Yeah. Guy over where? Okay.
How does wide is the way of destruction, narrow is the way of life?
The question is, wide is the way it leads to destruction, narrow is the way that enters into life. How's that fit? That's commonly understood as a salvation passage because you've got destruction here, so that means go to hell, and broad or narrow is the way that leads to life means go to heaven. However, in my own view, the word destruction there is never used that way by Matthew. The verb or the noun, it means ruin. And the life here is commonly understood in the New Testament not just as go to heaven when you die, but abundant life, rich life. And it is generally acknowledged that the sermon, in the sermon, Jesus is adopting the stance of a wisdom teacher, echoing Proverbs, these pithy one-liners. And if you go back to the book of Proverbs and you look up life, just get out of concordance and do it, it's always about a rich life now as a result of living faithfully or wisely. So it seems to me that this is a call to the disciples. This is a discourse on discipleship. And the narrow way is the disciple has a choice in front of him. We might call it a lordship decision. Romans 12, 1 and 2. He can evaluate all this and say, I'm going to go this way or this way. And he's exhorting them all through the sermon to go the narrow way, not the broad way. Because if they go the broad way, their lives will be ruined, they'll lose their lives, and they'll forfeit their final significance. So he wants them to go the narrow way, which the Greek has a kind of a pretty picture of pressing. It's like it's the way of difficulty and struggle. And if you choose that way and you persevere in it, you'll have life, true life now, and great reward in the kingdom. Okay. I just got a sign that said stop. Okay.